We are, yes, we've got it.
Going live.
It is Tooltip Tuesday here in the studio.
And for the first time, I'm here
I know,
in her
it's so
studio.
exciting.
She's come over to my studio a bunch of times. It's
Yay.
only fair that I came over to hers.
That's right. So I've got Julia live in the studio for Tooltip
Yes.
Tuesday. There we go. All right. Okay, so we are going to do this. We are going to talk about the wire cutters today. And the reason that we're going to talk about those is because
We got some new ones.
we got some new ones.
So I had a broken pair of pliers that we talked about in one of our previous videos. And as a result, we ended up in touch with the very nice Ian Weber from Lindstrom Tools. And we had a lovely Zoom meeting with him to talk about their tools. And he sent us some samples. He sent us samples of this flush cutter. It's one of their midline. It's a new line they're doing, the Edge flush cutters. And they have other tools in the same line. So they have very high-end tools. And then the midline is, the idea is that it's good quality, but it's slightly less expensive. So he wanted us to try it out. So we decided we would compare it to some of the other tools that we have,
Right.
which include a pair of flush cutters that I have had for a couple of decades, longer, probably close to 30 years. And Jennifer has a pair of
how
flush
they hold
cutters
up.
that she's had for a very long time as well.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah. So we've got the brand new Edge.
right,
We've got a couple of pairs of Xurons. We've got Craftsman.
right.
We've got your Italian pair,
The Italian ones, the old ones.
Right.
Lindstrom,
Lindstrom,
yep,
and
exactly.
Swanstrom.
Yep. So we have some double flush
Wide
cutters
variety.
that we're going to compare, and some flush cutters, single flush cutters, and then just some regular side cutters that are like the Craftsman ones that are the bog standard. You can cut anything with them.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So hi, welcome to Tooltip Tuesday. All right, I'm Jennifer from Little Metal Foxes.
And I am Julia, also from Little Metal Fox.
Yeah. So one of the things, and we're going to have Ian Weber from Lindstrom join us to talk about the varying angles a little more specifically at a later date. So we're looking forward to that. So shout out to Ian at Lindstrom. We also, speaking of Lindstrom, we've got some other things here too to compare it to. Now, one of the things most of you are probably familiar with when it comes to like wire cutters is more heavy duty wire cutters.
Right.
So, I mean, every house probably has a pair or two
Right.
that are a little bit, heavier duty, these are from China, but these are also, pliers and heavy duty wire cutters. They also have sort of grippers, grabbers in the back. And these are really good for like pulling wire, twisting wire, joining wire, cutting wire. So just home use, very heavy duty.
Right.
These will cut through like coat hanger wire.
Right.
These are really heavy duty.
Yes, the big ones that she has in her hand there, those are what I would call lineman's pliers.
Right.
And I actually use them. I have a pair I bought ages ago at Hardwick's, and I use them as draw tongs.
Oh yeah.
So I'll use them as a
Absolutely.
lightweight draw tong.
So you can kind of
basically.
see, let me flip my camera around here. Here we go. So you can see a close up on those. They have kind of a nice big grip in the grippy front and grippy in the side, but
Right.
they have these cutters here.
Right.
You can kind of see right there. But these are very heavy duty, and you'll notice on this that the cutting angle is
Right.
peaked on both sides.
Right.
So this will leave you kind of a peaked wire
Pinched, yeah.
pinched on
Mhm.
both sides. So big angle on that. You can see these have sort of been through
Been rode hard, put away
Yeah.
wet.
And these are Craftsman pliers, and so these have more of a little bit smoother pinch on that edge. Not quite as bad, but these I've had for probably 30 years too. But
Those are great for
Oh,
you
yeah.
just want to whack a chunk of wire off
they're-
something. It's
these
fine.
are some hardy wires, and so I usually use these with my binding wire. So you can
Exactly.
see that they have a little bit more of an angle on that cut,
Mhm.
and literally kind of pinch the wire off. So the thing that I think, for just basic household utility wire cutters, these can be really good. They're great for the studio for basic use for cutting things like, iron binding wire,
Right.
or heavier gauge copper wire, heavier gauge silver wire. But you know,
they're not going to leave a flush
No.
end on the cut, right?
Right.
But they also are next to indestructible,
absolutely,
right? Because the cutting blades, because the blades don't come to a really fine edge, the cutting blades can withstand more pressure when you close them, and you can cut thicker wire
yeah.
or harder wire. Like coat hanger wire is really, it's quite hard. Steel wire as well.
And having this kind of leverage as well,
The long handles.
the long
right?
handles allows you to cut heavier stuff too. If you ever look at like bolt cutters or chain cutters like that, they have very long handles,
leverage,
which
is your
makes
friend.
exactly, which make it a lot easier to cut through something really thick because they have more leverage to be able to do that. Yeah. So when it gets down to cutting things like fine wire,
right.
whether you're cutting, fine silver for filigree, or you're cutting your sterling wire or softer wire, the softer non-ferrous metals, and especially metal that is not work hardened, these pliers and cutters, wire cutters, are going to
The
be
lighter ones.
Yeah, are going to be your friends.
Are going to be
And these are really important to have in the studio for cutting things like bearing wire and filigree wire. So, but they do have different purposes. They're not all for cutting the same wire. Some of them are better for cutting chain. Some of them cut better on the tip. Some of them cut better farther back, just depending on what you're working on. So if you need something that's going to give you a flush cut on both sides of the wire when you cut it, something like the double flush cutter, which works like a shear,
or a scissor, right?
Or
Think of how scissors work. All of the double flush cutters are fundamentally scissors, right? Because the blades are passing each other, and that's what's doing the cutting. Whereas cutters like these are pinching together, yeah. And actually, the flush cutters work the same way. So flush cutters are pinch cutters, and that's why they're so delicate.
But they have they're
very
flat
narrow
on one side, but they pinch on the opposite side.
Right.
So you end up getting kind of a flat on this side.
On the flush side. The flush side's flush, but the other side.
But this side, where it comes in, we'll leave a point on the tip of the wire. So we'll show you some close-ups of those. The thing that is really important to note too is that with the use of these cutters, you want to make sure you're not cutting anything that's too thin or too thick, and you're working within kind of the specs of these cutters. If you're working with wire that's too thin, you can actually damage the blade or damage the wire because it's just not designed to cut that thin material. And sometimes the blades will bite against each other and damage the blade.
Right.
So you also don't want to cut too thick because you'll end up damaging the cutting edge on the wire cutters as well.
If you notch the blades,
Yeah.
you never can come back from that, right?
Yeah.
I had a pair of dressmaker scissors that my dad cut like wire or something with them to notch the blades.
No!
And it's like, the only thing you can do with that is you can have them reground.
Yeah.
But you can't.
Yeah.
You have to basically grind off metal until the notch is gone.
Yeah.
So
And with these, because they are so fine, they actually bypass just slightly, so they will pinch a little bit, but that actually protects the edge of the wire cutters from cutting against themselves.
right.
And
It's
dulling.
like you have two knives. Like if you took the cutting edges of two knives and smash them into each other, they're going to damage each other because they're so thin.
Right. So you just want to be careful not to cut stuff that's too thick because it will dent a notch into your pliers. And you'll notice on the close-up pictures that I've got of these, it's like chunk, chunk, chunk. And so you'll see an example
They
of that.
still work.
Yeah.
You just have to cut someplace that's not the notch.
To get a flush cut.
Right. And so
But-
then it becomes a little more of a process of, getting it in the right spot. So
let me show you what we're talking about with the cuts on these. And a little close up on this. And we'll get over here to the photos. So with this, you've got you can see
So this is your heavy craftsman lineman's pliers.
this is actually, these are the Chinese, the one from
right.
China.
Sorry. They're
Yes.
lineman's pliers, but they're the heavy lineman's pliers.
Yes.
Right.
And you can see they've got a little bit of a gap or a little bit of a pinch, a little beveled edge on the inside of that. And if you look at the end of the wire, you can see how it peaks the end of the wire, right? Here we go. This is the Craftsman pair of pliers. And you can really clearly see that bevel on the pliers, the wire cutters, as well as on the end of the wire. It's about a 45-degree angle, like a little peak of a little house.
Exactly.
About maybe a 60-degree angle on that. So it's pretty rough. Now these are the Xuron double flush cutters, and they do work like shears. And you can see the wire is flatter. It is going to have a pinch. Any of the wire cutters are going to give a little bit of a pinch, but the angle is going to be much flatter on the double flush because it's flat on both sides. Go. So these are the these are the new Lindstrom pliers, wire cutters, and they are flush cutters. You can see how flat that cut is. It is super flat on this side. You can see just a little bit of a seam where the wire cutter edges come together, but that is just a very slight pinch. But this is very flat on this side of the plier, or wire cutters. The inside, the other piece of wire is peaked. You do have a little bit of a pinch on the other side, but this end of the wire is going to give you that flat edge. Now, Julia, explain these.
Okay, so this is a Xuron double flush cutter, and I was trying to get in with my iPad so I could write on here, but it's not happening. So can you use the cursor? Could you use the cursor to?
I don't have a cursor on this one.
Okay, so basically the kind of U-shaped piece of metal that's at the bottom, you can't really see these very well. I think what we should do is talk about these in a minute when we can hold them up in front of the
But the piece on the bottom,
yeah, that piece on the bottom
is used to align.
It's used to align the wire because they're designed for is cutting heavier gauge wire and having a double flush cut. So they're basically bypass cutters. They will do a pretty good double flush cut, though you can see if you look at the piece of wire that is in Jennifer's fingers, they do tend to smash the side a little bit, right? So it's not perfectly flat.
So it's not round on that edge.
It's not round on that edge, but you can cut a double flush cut on fairly heavy gauge wire. The max cut for these goes up to 14 gauge non-ferrous, which is really heavy.
And these are Xurons.
And these are Xurons, right? So when we come back around and we're out of the images, we'll show you these a little more closely. And then this is my Italian ones. I bought these, good God, I think 25, almost 30 years ago through Greekers. If anybody remembers that. The model is TR-5000-R, and they're made in Italy, and they are still available. I think Rio carries them.
Yeah.
And they have a really good, nice, I've used them for a quarter of a century, and you can still see they have quite a good flush cut. They have a little bit of a pinch.
Yeah,
a little bit of a pinch.
But look at you've taken excellent care of those and used them for the right thing.
Right.
So you can see a little bit of a notch, a couple of pieces that
a little bit
of chewing.
A little bit chewed up.
But look how clean that cut is and how flat. And you can see a little bit of separation on the two sides, and that's the difference between those two blades coming together. But that little pinch is easy to file off if you're trying to solder this like an earring wire or earring post or a prong or something. You can see how flat that edge is.
But these have a max cut of 1.5 millimeters, which is about 15 gauge. So it says 1.5 millimeter copper wire. One of the things I really like about this pair of pliers or this pair of cutters is that information is printed on the inside of the handle.
Right.
So because I had these, I actually write that information. If it's not printed on the handle, I write it on the inside of the handle because different cutters have different max thicknesses, and I don't want to have to look them up. I want it.
They'll have max and minimums on all of them, and the type of wire. So I mean, some of them are designed like some of the Lindstrom pliers. They do not only pliers, they're wire cutters for jewelry use, but for avionics and the medical industry. So you've got wire cutters that'll cut like spring hard steel, but
only very thin wire.
Yes,
Ian was pointing
surgical,
right?
Very,
it's like
very
30 gauge, right? Like wire that's used in stents.
Very
so it's very fine,
precision.
it's very hard, and so they have a pair of cutters that's designed to cut them.
But they're not designed to cut everything.
They're not designed to cut everything. They're designed to cut 30. You know, it's the size of a hair, but it's very hard.
Now these are the double flush cut.
Right. These are Lindstrom, actually.
Right.
And these have a max cut of 18 gauge, and then these have couple of interesting features. They have a notch in them, and so at the notch you can cut up to 16 gauge. The notch is kind of like a bone notch on a pair of kitchen scissors. And then they also have a stop. You can't see it in this photograph, but we'll show you in a minute. They have a screw that allows you to change how much they overlap, so that you can control that.
The bite.
You can control the bite.
Yeah. And you'll notice too, these kind of pinch the end in a way that takes it out around as well.
Yeah.
Which, if you're using shears on a round piece of wire,
that's going to do that.
You're going to end up pinching it. Yeah, exactly.
Anything that's a scissor cut, you're going to get a little bit of that on the side.
Right. And these are my heavily abused.
These are your workhorse.
My Xurons.
Xurons.
And these are a flush cutter as well. And these will cut up to like 12 gauge soft metal. So I have used these extensively for cutting, doing a flush cut, and they do a really nice flush cut on the end. And they are real serious workhorses. And if you look at the tip of these pliers as well, you can see I've used them a little bit over the years.
Yeah, I see a couple notches in there.
But these are $14 pliers.
Right.
$14, $15 pliers. These are not expensive pliers. And cutters, and they will cut up to like 12 gauge.
Right.
So they are amazing
for the price.
Right. They really are.
You can afford to abuse them, is what you're saying.
I can, and I've got 3 pairs of them just in case one goes wrong.
Right.
But they,
they do. Looking at the notches.
Yeah, but they do cut incredibly flush. They are. The other thing I like about them is that the tip on these is very blunt. So I can put these down on a table on my workbench, measure wire directly on my bench, and cut them with the nose of these pliers.
Right.
Which is what I use them for more than anything else. And I can cut really fine chain with these as well.
Which is also true
because they're so blunt. I can lay chain down on a table and cut with the tip of these and not damage the tip of these cutters.
Nice.
The thing that you have to kind of look at on all of these is the cutting tip. Because if the tip on these, like this, it can get into real tight places because they're so blunt. But something like this, I wouldn't want to cut with the tip because it's so narrow and so fine.
Right.
But I do have, a little material behind that cutting edge that helps it be a little more stable, but it may separate. They may pull apart, which,
Well, think of scissors. Like if the rivet loosens in a pair of scissors, and then the blades, that same thing can happen to bypass cutters like these.
Right. But you'll notice on the Lindstrom edge that they've got that, again, very flush cut all the way up to the tip.
And then a rounded tip.
And a blunt edge on that tip. So I can cut right on the table with these. And these have also on the inside.
Yes, I love that it had printed on the inside.
Thank you, Lindstrom. They have a min of 0.2 millimeters. So a 20th of a millimeter, which is what, 30 gauge?
I don't know, very fine.
Yeah,
tiny.
30 gauge, I think. And then a max of 1 millimeter, which is 18 gauge. So these you can use, are designed to cut with that in mind.
You said you really like the grips on these.
I really do. The grips on these, they've got like this little microfine.
Okay, you know what we should do?
I love them.
Get rid of these pictures, and then we can show, so then you can see what they're talking about.
Yes. Flow again. Yeah. So the the Lindstrom Edge, the new ones that they're coming out with, they've got, and I can do it over here. Let's get back over here. This camera, and I can show you this. Turn that around. But on the Lindstrom pliers, you can see
They have a nice sort of waffle
they have
texture.
this little grippy texture. It's like tire tread, but it's really super soft and non-skid. So I love that
Here,
about these.
these over there. The only other cutters that are here on the table that have any texture on the grip are the Italian ones. That turn it to the side, so they have a little bit, but it's not. It's a little coarser, which is fine. It's just that
Right.
all the other ones have smooth handles.
But check out the inside on these, and you'll see, if you can get a good angle on these, the inside of the plier. So it's nice and flush and flat on that side, but you'll see on the inside
Right. It has a very
that it is peaked.
deep angle, and that's
Right.
because you have to protect the edge of the blade, right? You
Right.
have to have enough meat
Right.
of metal behind the edge of those very thin blades,
But
so that
but the flush cutters,
the double flush cutter.
double flush cutters, are like shears.
They're like scissors. They have
Yeah.
a very thin blade, so they're
Right.
the ones that you can get off out of alignment. So here, hold these up. These are the ones that we were talking about.
Right. Yes.
So you can see, can you rotate them around so you can look at the end of end on. Yeah, so if you look at them end on, so here's a piece of wire.
There's the U.
Yeah, here you go. There's a piece of wire to stick in there.
Okay.
So what happens is the cutter parts, nope,
Other way. That way?
it's in the front.
There we go.
No.
That way.
You don't have to stick it through a hole. You just
Oh, I'm just trying to get it lined up. There we go.
yeah.
Okay.
So now turn it around so you can see it from the front edge. I know this is tricky. Like that. Yeah, it's perfect. So you can see that those two big wide
Here.
blades are cutting.
These.
Those are the things that cut. And then these two U-shaped pieces of metal on either side of those are stabilizing the wire so that it can't twist sideways and get an angled cut.
Right.
Is the idea with those. But what I have found is that they do leave those little U-shaped pieces of wire do leave little marks on the edge of the metal.
Yeah.
So
They compress the wire a little bit.
a little bit, right? So but they cut up to 14 gauge. So
Right.
if you're cutting 14 gauge, a
Well-
few little marks probably aren't a big deal.
Well, and I like that.
Oh, this was the other one
Yeah.
that has
yeah.
the stop and the notch.
It has to stop at a notch.
Right. So it has a little screw that you can screw, so you can set how far, whether they meet, whether the blades come right together. They don't actually touch; they pass each other. But you can have them come right up to each other, or you can have them be a little further apart by screwing the screw tighter.
So that stops them from collapsing out too far. So a couple of things that for the jewelry studio that I do appreciate is, a good pair of good workhorse pliers like this
Inexpensive pliers.
one. Inexpensive,
If you're
really
not sure
good
what kind of
performance.
metal it is, you cut them with your cheap cutters.
Yeah.
Because if you're not sure, you don't want to grab the nickel silver or the piece of steel. It's a piece of binding wire, and you thought it was a piece of oxidized silver.
Yeah. And keep a pair with your binding wire so you don't confuse it. I keep my binding wire separate at my solder station over here, and I actually have my wire cutters right there with it. So all my jewelry pliers are very separate.
You have to make it easy.
Yeah.
To use the right tool. You have to have the right tool near where you're going to use it,
Yes.
because otherwise you're going to grab the wrong tool because it's convenient.
Right. So these two, if you can see that on the inside,
Right.
have the
the
Mins and
information.
Max. Yeah, Mins and Max on there. So the thing that Ian told us about this is that the Edge may be rebranded with Lindstrom as well.
Mhm.
These are from Lindstrom. But this is a mid-range line that they're coming out with that is a little less expensive than the very high-end wire cutters and pliers that they have already for the industry. So I like a couple of things I like about these that I will say is I do like the grips on these. I like the fact that they're kind of lightweight and they're very nimble and they're the right size. And I have a fairly medium to large hand for working with things. So these are actually a really good size for me. And they feel good in the hand, which some pliers and some wire cutters, if they are too small or the handle doesn't feel right in your hand, you don't want to use them. They just don't feel good.
I have another comment about these that I just noticed.
Yeah.
So these have a spring. All of these have a spring, but the way the spring is, if you hold this up, you can see the spring is kind of up here where the handle is. Yes. So if you have a plier rack that you hang the pliers on, the spring isn't going to get hung up on it. These,
because of the double leaf,
and I like these cutters, but because of the double leaf, they'll get hung up on
every time. They
and then
always
these
get hung up.
have a spring that hangs down, and it's impossible. Right?
Yeah.
It's never. Yeah.
So that's big. And these have a spring that's going to get caught on everything.
They're not too bad.
But look at that. I mean, it's a spring. I mean, you catch that on something that's going to hold the spring out.
That's true.
Yeah.
I have a plier rack that has a wide enough wire that the spring on these doesn't catch on it.
Right.
But you're right. If it were narrow, or if you had a plier rack that was like a sheet of metal, it would catch on you.
Yeah. So that's another really good point about those.
Right.
I do like this one a lot.
Feature.
So yes, good job, Lindstrom.
Lindstrom.
Yay.
We expect no less from Lindstrom.
Exactly. So I would definitely say, look at what you need the cutters for, what your daily use is. Look for wire cutters that are going to perform in that range the best for you. Right.
Don't buy a cutter that only goes up to 18 gauge cut.
If you're working with 16 gauge wire.
If you're working with 16 gauge wire or 14 gauge wire, buy a cutter spend the extra money to buy the cutter that is going to suit the work you do, because otherwise you're going to end up buying multiple cutters.
Yeah.
You're going to
and
if that
money is $15.
Right. Because you said you cut up to like 12 gauge.
Those cut up to about 12 gauge,
Damn.
Yeah. They're good. And they cut down to like really fine wire.
Right.
So I really like the range on those.
Yeah. This is the Xuron.
Those are the Xurons. And those are just my go-to everyday plier. And I started using those.
Yeah, I can't quite read
I think
what
those
it says.
came from Eurotool.
Something shear. It has a number on it. 227 something right there. I need to get out. Wait, didn't you have a loop?
Xuron shear 2175. Sacco, Maine, made in the USA. There you go. So, yay! Love
that's an interesting point, actually. One of the things Ian told us when we had our talk with him was that the Lindstrom plants are now in Spain, right? They moved them from Sweden?
Switzerland.
Switzerland?
Switzerland.
Okay. They moved them from some European country with an S.
Switzerland.
Okay. And they moved the actual machines that the tools are made on from their original location to Spain, right?
To San Sebastian.
If anybody says, "Oh no, they went downhill after they moved to Spain," it's like the machines are exactly the same.
Yeah. So you've got Lindstrom was many years ago picked up by Snap-on Tools.
That's right. Yeah.
So Snap-on, brilliant tool company, love them. Purchased a couple of different European companies. One of them being Lindstrom Tools, which originally was a Swiss company. The other thing that's important to note about not just the manufacturer's tooling and location, the Swiss are extremely good precision tools, or make extremely good precision tools, but they again took the original equipment and tooling to the new location. The thing that has happened over the last 40 or 50 years, is as steel is being recycled, remade, pulled out of the earth new, the steel has changed. It has evolved. And steel is not the same as it was 30 years ago, even 20 years ago. So you've got steel that is a different quality now than it used to be. So even if you're buying steel from the same source, it's the same makeup of steel. It's still a different steel than it used to be 30 years ago. So some of the older tools, like your Italian tools, the steel in those is probably a much higher quality steel than any steel that you would be able to get now, new, on an expensive plier. So that's probably why the edge on those has held up so well, because of the quality of the steel. So that has changed.
I always thought, we should probably ask Ian about this.
Yeah.
Because I always thought that the issue with the changes in steel was that steel can be recycled, right?
Exactly.
Which is great. That's wonderful. We're all in the business to recycle metal.
Right.
So in countries that, like, in parts of Asia, they do ship breaking. They actually take the decommissioned ships and tear them apart and take the steel out and reuse it.
Yeah.
But in the countries that use recycled steel, because it's a mix of different alloys, because there are literally hundreds of different, slightly different alloys of steel,
Right.
and because you're mixing them when you are smelting them down, you're going to end up with something that isn't a particularly specific recipe.
Right.
So if you're getting tools from Pakistan or India or China that are made with recycled steel, even if their designs are good and the tooling is good, the quality of the steel itself might be a little lower quality simply because it's like it's a mix.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're getting tools that are made from fresh, raw steel that is freshly alloyed for that purpose, that they know exactly what the alloy is, then
which is not a lot of people do that.
Not a lot. So that's the issue, is that not a lot of the steel is that steel anymore.
Right.
Whereas 50 years ago, all the steel was that steel.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Well, even the steel coming from ships, if it's only been used for ships, and then it's being used for tooling, and not just that, but how many times that steel has been recycled can make a big difference.
Right. Right.
And how the steel is being treated in the production of the tool.
Yeah.
So some tools are drop forged, which hardens them, and the steel is hard and they've been hardened. It's a hardened steel. Or if it has been like die cut or laser cut, the steel is not going to be as hard necessarily as it would be if it had been drop forged. So there are different treatments of the steel. There are different kinds of steel.
Right.
For people
and
that
all of this affects how the tool works.
Exactly,
right?
Yeah. And for people that are knife makers, you guys know this. So shout out to Andy at Rosecraft. Hi. And Swags. Hello. So you guys know it's the quality of steel that's being used in things like blades. It makes a huge difference. And the quality of steel in blades that's being used now is not the quality of steel that's being used 50 years ago. So if you look at old knives or old tools, you're going to find a really high quality steel. That's why a lot of metalsmiths like to recycle their old files and old tools into punches. And
Matthew Chemney,
because
he loves the tangs of old files, and he loves old punches. He goes to flea markets and yard sales and stuff, and picks up old tools to make his punches.
Because it's a good quality steel.
Really good quality steel.
Right. Right. So, but want to say again, big thanks to Ian at Lindstrom for sending us
these
to try those out. And they're, I think, going to be right up there with my daily go-to pliers now, or cutters. So I love these. But
it was fun to do a little smorgasbord
of testing,
cutters and
testing them out. So so thanks a lot, Ian, and go check your pliers. The other thing that you might want to do, if you find that you've got a little bit of snagginess or sharpness on the edge, or you've got a little, like a clip that you did, like take a little ding out, you can hit those with a little bit of sandpaper on that flat edge and take that little burr off. And that will help those perform a little bit.
You would only do that if you have damaged your tool.
Exactly.
And you're trying to come back from and recover to some degree the damage you've done. You don't
want to condition them.
You're not conditioning these. These
Yeah.
are not something that needs to be dressed.
Out of the box, they should be fun.
Out of the box, they should be fun.
So for me, I can actually take these and like resharpen
Grind
them like a
off,
knife
yeah.
a little bit and resharpen that edge. So I can do that with some of these. But just
And
as
you know,
a note.
it's only $12, so if she screws it up, it's not the end of the world either.
Got another pair.
Got another pair.
Got another pair of cutters. So I do have one we didn't talk about, which are these.
Yeah, those are very specialty then. I know you really, well, you do a lot more production work than I do. So
I love these. So yes, these are double flush cutters as well. They will cut up to, I think, like
this
10,
looks like a parrot beak. They're
10,
enormous.
They're like 10 gauge, yeah.
Look at
But
that.
they're flush cut. They're double
like
flush
bolt
cutters. Yeah. But they cut a very flush cut on both sides. So they're double flush. And they have, they're drilled for holes in here. So you can actually put your wire in and clip it that way, which I don't usually do. But I can cut square, round, triangle wire, whatever shape I want with this. And this is an adjustable stop that screws in.
That's what makes them so, yeah.
And it screws in, and I can adjust the stop so I can cut wire over and over again
The
to a
same
specific length. Yeah.
So if you're doing production
So,
work,
love these.
really useful.
And if they're in the way, take them off. But it does have the spring, and it has an automatic stop, so you can adjust the stop on those too.
Nice.
So yeah, I do love those cutters. So yeah, so thanks for joining us. Also, we've got a bunch of fun classes coming up, a bunch of new stuff.
We
So
do.
check
we
it
do.
out.
Yes.
And yeah.
Jennifer's got, now that the heat of the summer is starting to abate here a little bit, it was actually in the 60s today
I
in
know,
Seattle
it's so
and
nice.
raining, this much more normal weather for
Yeah.
Seattle.
Yeah.
So the heat wave of the last few weeks is kind of calming down. And
It's starting to
so
look like fall.
Jennifer's going to do several
Do it.
wax working classes because
Yes.
you cannot work with wax when it's that hot.
Yeah, so I've got Mitsuru wax carving and a couple of other
Right, so-
casting.
Mitsuro Hikime, which is the Japanese taffy-like wax.
Right.
This is a brand new class, people, and she's going to teach you how to make the rest, how to make your own Mitsuro if you want to
From scratch.
from scratch, or you can buy it, or you do want to put it both, and then she'll show you how to use it. But you're also going to do the casting class, the
Yes.
3-part kettlebell, the casting. What is it? Casting rings.
Casting rings with stone settings.
Yes.
Yeah. So
can't remember the
doing
name
a,
of it.
a three-part
Change the name.
three-part mold with cuttlefish. So we're doing that. Also doing wax carving and mold making classes coming up. So a whole bunch of classes for those of you that want to be doing some lost wax casting. We've got a couple of
Cuttlebone casting for rings with stones is what it's called. So
Yeah.
it's all about,
a little more advanced class.
it's a more advanced, an intermediate level class. So it's about casting the shank and the bezel or the setting. So you can cast prongs in one go, right? No solder seams. She's amazing. I took that class with her years ago and I was just like, oh my God, you can do that with 3 cuttlebones?
Yeah, you can. Yeah. So yeah, it's fun. We'll have a good time doing that and a whole bunch more. So and Jeff DeBoer is coming up, and Jeff is amazing. He does cat and mouse armor. So if you are at all interested in repoussé and chasing, this is
Even if you're not,
yeah.
even if you just want to see what he does.
If you're interested in cats and mice, if you're interested in museum quality armor, if you're interested in costuming, if you're interested in any of those things, or just in an amazing Canadian artist, join him for that. It's we set the class so it's still a relatively small class, but we want to make sure we have plenty of room for the people that want to take
Yes.
that. It is so going to be worth it. He's doing primarily a demonstration of practical chasing.
He called it practical chasing. It's all about basically chasing when you're doing multiples. So it's like production. You know, how would you structure your chasing if you were doing production work? Because he'll do a series of maybe 12 of one mouse, armor, and he has to chase the little shields and parts of their little helmets and all of that. And so he's figured out a bunch of really clever ways to speed up that process without giving up the detail, right? Because otherwise chasing is an incredibly labor-intensive process.
Yeah, and it's so small. It's so small.
Because it's for mice, armor for mice. Yeah.
So great. Yes. Join us next time in the studio for Tooltip Tuesday. And if you have any questions, please put your comments down below. Make sure you like us, say hi,
Subscribe.
thumbs up, subscribe. And if you hit that bell, you will, and subscribe, you'll know anytime we're live, usually on Tuesday evenings. But we also have other free content, as well as some slow jewelry. Sometimes we'll turn on the camera in the studio. We have interviews with other artists. We have all kinds of
Playing with fire,
all kinds of stuff coming up. So there's some other good content. But join us here, or come take a class and join us in our studio. So anyway, that's it for tonight. So thanks a lot.